And Drake is making history 2 times in one day. The rapper has broken the Beatles record for the most cumulative weeks on the Billboard 200 and becomes the first artist to surpass 500 million RIAA certified units. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
New Schools for New Orleans is committed to celebrating the hard-working teachers of New Orleans Public Schools. Join us at the 4th Annual NOLA Teacher Fest, sponsored by the All-State Sugar Bowl New Orleans Teacher Community. The NOLA Teacher Fest is happening Friday, May 2nd at Champion Square from 4 to 7 p.m. The fest is open to teachers, paraprofessionals, deans, coaches, counselors, and other school support staff. Visit our website to learn more and RSVP, www.newschoolsforneworleans.org.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK.
And good morning. Welcome to the Good Morning Show. Guess what? It's Dr. Torrance Sanders back in the chair here on the wonderful campus of Xavier University. WBOK 1230 AM. Dr. Wyatt is taking a little vacay. And we wish her well until she returns, because we know she keeps the seat hot. And we're here this morning. We got a co-host, Dr. Andrea Boyles.
Yes, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to see you. Good to be with you this morning.
Likewise.
Yeah, and I know you've been here before, but let the people know who you really are. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be back with you all. I am hoping that all is well for the better part of today, tomorrow, and forward with you all. I have been, away for a little bit. I am a scholar.
Yes.
And so I've been busy teaching. That is my passion, my first love, educating. And so I've been busy with that and busy with writing. I have a third book underway, so I've been busy with that and research and a number of other things. For those of you that may not be familiar with me, I'm a sociologist and a criminologist. And so I am also very busy in the community.
Yes.
Just staying the course, doing all things positive to the best of my ability. And again, I'm so thankful and grateful and humble every time to be able to be back here speaking with you all and as well as the people.
Yeah. Well, no, thanks for being here. And so can you give us a sneak peek on that third book? You got the title already, or how much can we?
well, what I will say, right, because you can't share everything, But what I will say is that the through line for all of my work is resistance.
And so ring the bell on that one. This is a time of resistance. If you don't know, now you know, right?
Yes, absolutely. So nothing's changed in that sense.
Okay.
I continue to do the work empirically and otherwise to help us unpack resistance.
Yes. And now where do you teach mostly now?
I teach sociology and Africana Studies courses.
Where?
So that at Tulane.
Okay, Tulane. That's right.
Yes,
Okay, Tulane.
yes.
Okay.
But I'm certainly here today as an independent scholar.
I hear you.
Right. Independent and separate of all organizational and institutional affiliation.
Sure.
But yeah. So I am between both of those areas. Again, Africana Studies, sociology, criminology. And all things relative to resistance.
Well, all of those things, they make my skin tingle. I love all of that stuff.
Yes, and community. All
and
things
community.
relative
That's
to
right.
community.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, we're going to have a great show this morning. In between our conversations, myself and Dr. Boyles, we're going to have in this hour State Representative Mandy Landry. As you know, the Louisiana legislature is in session as of 2 days ago. And so there's a lot going on. And so she's going to talk about some of the bills that has been proposed and hear kind of a firsthand account of what's happening. And then in our second hour, we'll have Ms. Joycelyn Pinkerton, who's a social worker, and she's the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Program Director for the City of New Orleans. And we'll have from the NOPD, from the Special Victims Division, Sergeant Howard, to talk to us about their work in that area. So a lot of good information this morning. So yeah. I hadn't been here in a little while, but this April has been a good month for me personally. I had my wedding anniversary, 32 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes, right, last week on the 9th. It's actually last week. And then,
what a blessing.
And then on Sunday, had my 28th pastoral anniversary.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. I want to thank all of those who came out. We had several dignitaries, elected officials, and just so we had just a wonderful time. But just amazing how time flies.
Yes, congratulations.
Yeah, well, thank you so
on
much.
On both fronts.
Yeah,
that's just a blessing.
Hey,
yeah,
that's right. My wife put up for me for 32 years. That's right.
Look, and God longer.
That's right. That's right. I didn't think I'd do anything.
For all of us. Yes.
Hey,
yes.
I didn't think I'd do anything for 32 years. So, but it's
now,
been good.
see?
Yeah. And so yeah, thankful for those events. And then, but yesterday, in fact, it was on some of the news stations this morning. One of my church members, in fact, my goddaughter was tragically killed last year.
Oh, I'm so
this time
sorry.
at the Republic. She was one of the people who was killed while they were waiting to go in. And so the killer or killers have not been found. But yesterday we had a balloon release at the same site, and I was joined again by a lot of elected officials and others, our family members and friends. And so we remember her.
Yeah,
and so
sure.
we're still, thankfully, violence has dropped in our city, crime and the statistics.
Yeah.
But still, anyone that leaves us that way is still one too many.
Absolutely. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but we're looking at a great day. It's beautiful weather out there today.
it is. It's a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that people will be able to get out and take in some fresh air, and sunlight.
Yes.
Sunshine is so healthy for us,
That's right. That's right.
And so, get
Yeah.
outside. I plan to do that for sure. As we say, I'm outside.
That's right. Be outside.
I'm outside.
That's right.
Outside.
And hey,
yeah.
this is the outside time. I don't know, over the weekend I also went to French Quarter Fest.
Okay.
And,
me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I walked the length of it. I went just once, back, and then came back and then said, "All right, that's enough for us."
Oh, well, you did good because I couldn't get through.
Oh, wow.
And so I just really unpacked my chair and found a comfortable spot and took the music in and the breeze and the sunshine and all of that. I enjoyed myself. So.
Yeah, it seems like I always forget my lawn chair. My little.
I brought mine.
So I gotta walk or find a seat somewhere, steal a seat somewhere,
Right,
or sit on the ground, which I've done occasionally. But then sometimes, it's hard to get up sometimes. You sit down for a while. But but it was amazing. I mean, I don't know. I remember going to, if not the first one, like the second one or the third one.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is massively different.
Yeah, how so? Because I'm still getting acclimated.
Okay, yeah, no,
with
I mean,
all these...
it has grown. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, you can walk around those first couple of ones.
Okay, got it.
This one, I mean, now, I mean, and even the security has grown. Of course, that's because I'm sure of the recent events. But just everything, more stages. It's truly throughout the entire French Quarter now. I mean, from the Mint to all the way, to Canal Street and everything. So yeah, it's just like everything in New Orleans. You can't keep a good party down. So it keeps growing and growing, and then hey, next weekend is Jazz Fest.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I really appreciate the back-to-back festivals. I said one thing's for sure: you can always get some joy somewhere, somehow in this city.
That's right.
And I love that.
That's right. Yeah.
So lots of smiling faces were out over the weekend, that kind of thing. So
yeah, and even in between that, the Ponchatoula Festival was out there, the Strawberry Festival, and I haven't been out there in many years, but I used to go back to back, but I didn't feel like to drive this time.
So I haven't been to that one just yet.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm making my rounds. I need to get to that one.
They do everything with strawberries.
Yes.
So you can take every kind of strawberry and chocolate on it and do this with it and strawberry
like
shake.
Literally, huh?
Oh, yeah. It is it's amazing what all he can do with
So
strawberries.
I'm a foodie. So what is the most...
Oh, boy. I'm not too experimental. I stick to the basic. Give me a strawberry smoothie, strawberry, ice cream, whatever. But no, they do everything. Yeah. With
fried, all of that, huh?
If you can, they will. Trust me. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But so yeah, I was looking. You mentioned you teach at a university. I teach at a university.
Sure.
And I have children. Both of them have not large student loans, but they do have some student loans. But there's a lot going on.
Yes.
I don't know if you keep up with that with student loans.
Yes.
Biden did his best, I think, to try to get rid of them for many people, and he did.
Yeah.
And everything, and the plan that was out there in terms of the forgiveness plan that was not operating correctly for many years. He kind of tried to deal with that. But now, everything is still kind of up in the air as to how they're talking about some crazy payment plans being thrown out there. No more what they call the income-driven payment plan, where they recognize even if you have $100,000, you can't afford to pay $2,000 a month loan, a student loan, so they would keep it reasonable according to your income. But it's like the billionaires in DC don't care. They say, well, everybody should be able to pay $2,000 a month because they can.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a lot going on with that, as well as with students. I'm reading on students having visas terminated. Some of the foreign students, international students, having visas terminated. Several, I think about 14 in the last few days from Louisiana schools. And visas have been terminated. So, I mean, there's just a lot going on. You talk about resistance. What are some ways that you talk about in terms of how people should resist some of the stuff that's going on that we know is clearly, not in most people's best interests?
So, it's interesting that that conversation comes following our discussion on the festivals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's one thing specifically I have been doing. It's really just trying to be positive energy.
Yes.
Create atmosphere wherever I go, directly with encouraging people. And one, for example, is to get out and get fresh air. Those kinds of things. I think a lot of times when we think about resistance, we're thinking about large scale mobilization efforts and things in that way. And sometimes that's possible, but oftentimes may not be so accessible or possible for people, broadly. And so one way to kind of resist, at least, feeling the gloom and doom of, uncertain times, is certainly to be able to take in, the little things, the everyday things that we do. Pausing for a moment, meditating, exercise, again, getting out, taking in fresh air, being very deliberate about who we surround ourselves with, or we surrounding ourselves with hopeful folks or, people who are just, for lack of better words, depressed. And sometimes that's inescapable, but it's about, what I've encouraged people to do is to be deliberate, very intentional about finding ways to stay, in good space. A year ago, let me say this, I had a friend, it's been over a year now, a friend that died of suicide. And so, and she her case was very national, gained national, international attention. Dr. Antoinette Candia Bonnie,
Yes.
Bailey, excuse me. And so she was vice president of student affairs, so to kind of, blend the whole idea of from, whether we're talking about educational space or well beyond it, I think that no one is exempt. Especially in times where, one of the things I talk about in my research is disorder. I reconceptualize what community disorder is, And so whether we're experiencing the effects of disorder or otherwise, there's space in which we have to be, as difficult as it might be in these uncertain times, find folks or partner with people, in ways where we can be intentional about galvanizing whatever measures of peace that we can so that we can be sustained in these times. And one thing about it, I think all of us can kind of speak to resilience.
Yes.
And so we know that there is always space and place to bounce back. And so it's about being very creative in finding those ways. And so, yeah.
No, that's wonderful. And that's a good probably segue also to throw it out to the listeners. Well, how are you resisting in this day and time? Even though we have second lines, we have festivals and all of that, but it's hard to tune out all of the negativity and the craziness that we are hearing and dealing with from DC and other places. What are you doing to resist? 504-582-9422. How are you keeping yourself together? How are you keeping your family together? What are you doing so that you can bounce back no matter the things that are being thrown at all of us? High insurance rates, whether it's your car, your house, right? Flood insurance, whether it's just gas prices or the threat of higher prices for more food and other things with these tariffs. But all of that stuff, is not under we can't stop stop those things, but you can still be in control of yourself.
Right. Protect our peace. How do we protect our peace?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're doing that. And so talk to us more about this disorder. You said you're reconceptualizing disorder. I mean, I know we think about, just this, all the stuff going on at the same time, and it seems chaotic. What does disorder mean to you?
So criminologically, we've been trained, and folks are still being trained that when we think about disorder, it's, uncodified behaviors that may or may not be criminal, typically not criminal. So, but disorder can certainly transition to criminality is what I'm speaking about. But, oftentimes it is discussed as if it is uncodified, unconventional behaviors, culturally unacceptable behaviors across communities, particularly poor communities, disadvantaged communities in some way or another. And so what I have argued is that disorder is not does not emerge from those communities and does not wholly characterize, those communities. But it is quite the opposite. I, as a sociologist and criminologist, look at processes, and I look at the way social structures, sort of influence and fuels all the everyday transactions that happens in our communities, across communities. So I reverse the trend and the discussion to the degree and the definition of it to the degree that it doesn't begin with the people, it began with processes. It begins with structuring, structuring of all these different systems that then fuel or that has a propensity of shaping the everyday or influencing the everyday interactions, across communities.
Yes.
So quite the opposite. And I think that makes for a paradigm shift in how we think about things. And it also keeps people from being blamed, from carrying the load. If we think about it from that angle, it eliminates the idea of blaming folks who have the least amount of power and wherewithal, at least structurally, to be able to make, mass difference.
Yeah. Well, and what I hear from what you're saying is that, we need to look at all the stuff that's going on around us.
Yes.
And kind of what sets the stage for sometimes our behavior, what sets the stage for the choices that people have to make. It's like even with elections, people say, well, who are you voting for? I was like, well, who decided who was going to run?
Right, yeah.
Even go before that.
Asking the questions,
Exactly. It's like that little child, well, why? Well, because such and such. Well, why?
Absolutely.
Well, because such and such. Well, why? And, we get frustrated as adults with the why. But you know what? We all need to go back to being 3-year-olds,
yes.
and asking those why, and why does it have to be the way that it is in certain ways? And how can we change things? Why does it have to continue to go a certain way when we see negative effects emerging from some of the ways that that have been set up? I won't say we've set up, but that have been set up.
Yes.
That we find ourselves trying to swim in, and some of us are drowning in, frankly.
You are certainly an educator because the why, I think we all push, at least I do as well.
That's right.
And so also on the other end of the why, it is also about making sure that we answer those questions or seek spaces to get more information that are accurate,
That's right.
legitimate, right? Because there is a grave misunderstanding, and I'm using grave deliberately.
In my mind.
Misunderstanding, misinformation, miscommunicating, and all those things that can be ultimately detriment.
And in the age of social
Or
media,
detrimental,
disinformation is the norm rather than the norm. Hey, we got to go to our first break this morning, but we'll be back. Dr. Torrance Sanders, Dr. Andrea Boyles here talking with you on WBOK, 1230 a.m., the station you're listening to all day long.
All right.
Hey, this is Steve Poston. Be sure to listen to WBOK 1230 a.m. every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. and Sunday evening at 5 p.m., bringing you the best Southern Soul barroom music with the Southern Soul Weekend Party Mix, hosted by me, of course. I'll be playing your favorite Southern Soul music by artists from all over the South, right here on WBOK 1230 a.m. or online at WBOK1230.com. The station you listen to longer. Listen to longer. Listen to longer.
Connect with NOLA Public Schools. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X for the latest updates. Sign up for District Digest, our official newsletter where we share district achievements, celebrate student successes, and keep you informed about our vision of providing a high-quality education. And don't miss our school board meetings. Watch in person or live stream on YouTube. Stay informed. Stay engaged. Visit NOLAPublicSchools.com today. Again, that's NOLAPublicSchools.com.
Hey, New Orleans, look for important changes to your natural gas service. This summer, Delta Utilities takes over for Entergy Gas with a Louisiana-born, Louisiana-based approach to safe, clean, reliable natural gas. No interruptions or rate changes due to the transition, just dependable service and modernized technology to keep you running smoothly. Get to know us at deltautilities.com and stay tuned for more later this summer. Delta Utilities, focused on natural gas, committed to New Orleans.
Making a difference in the community. WBOK 1230 a.m.
Good morning, wake up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK.
And we're back. 723, Dr. Torrance Sanders, and here our co-host, Dr. Andrea Boyles, scholar, and just all around beautiful person.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
Yes. And we were talking about protecting your peace during this chaotic time we're living in. 2025 is something else already,
Yes.
and here we are just in April. But talking about the festivals. From French Quarter Fest to upcoming Jazz Fest, and just what we're doing to protect our peace. But we want to talk about some local things that have been happening. And right now, in fact, the media is reporting that the Sewage and Water Board has two finalists for their executive director position. The existing one, or he resigned in February. His name was Ghassan Corbin, and I remember interviewing him several times here on WBOK. Seemed like a nice man, very informed and knowledgeable, but he's left. And so now there are two finalists. One is Bethany Bizak. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And she's currently the city of San Diego's Transportation Department Director, so from San Diego. And then Randy Heyman, the Commissioner and CEO of the Philadelphia Water Department. And apparently, this position, has been hotly contested. There were a total of 68 candidates, and just a few have come out. Now these final two, and so the board of directors for the Sewage and Water Board is expected to conduct interviews with both candidates and make a final selection by the end of April. Well, normally I wouldn't be concerned about who runs the Sewage and Water Board, but if you live through Katrina, and if you live in New Orleans for any length of time, you know the vital importance of this position. It may not be as important as the mayor, so to speak, but it is
crucial.
It is crucial that this person knows what he or she is doing to help address our street flooding. And of course, we live in a centuries-old city with some centuries-old pipes, apparently.
Sure.
And apparently, pipes break. They want to break sometimes. So, have you ever been affected by flooding in the city personally?
I have not. I have not, except, and I don't really call that effect, keeping things in perspective. But, I do see streets and things like that, in my drives here or there that are almost underwater, to some measure. And it's just, an inconvenience. And I'm saying that from privileged space. So I can't even imagine. And I empathize with folks who have had to deal with far worse.
Yeah.
So, it's an absolutely important position. And it will need to be somebody that can get in and get going, hit the ground running on all things improvement and fix.
That's right. Well, I've lost one car personally. My wife lost one car personally. In fact, while we were still dating, before we were even married, so this is over 30 years ago, and she had a car parked in the Maison Blanche parking garage. That's how long ago this was with Maison Blanche, and and tried to drive down after it had been raining and drove just straight into a bunch of water, and it just stopped right there.
It just shut off.
And so it was funny because we weren't even married. We were considering getting married then, and she says, "Well, you owe me a car." So I said, "Well, what if I marry you? Then what? No,
you still owe a car. Listen."
Yeah. So I did eventually. So this is funny, kind of funny, but not real funny. But I did. That was a it's called with the T-top on it, like a 300ZX, I think it was back in the day.
Okay,
this is early 1990s. She loved that car. So I eventually bought her a Ford Mustang, with the drop top. It was a apple red, just
sure.
She loved it.
Okay, fancy.
But I bought it in like the spring, like this time of year of 2005. Guess what happened later, 2005?
Okay.
Katrina.
Yeah.
We parked it in the garage at the house. She said, "Oh, it's gonna be safe right here."
Oh.
Came back, it was gone. I mean, it wasn't gone, but it was unusable. And then there's another time I know I was on St. Charles Avenue eating at Houston's, and it just started raining, and it kept on raining, and I was in there a little longer than usual, and I came out, and the water was all in the car. And I couldn't go anywhere. So flooding. I've experienced it and dealt with that personally, but I'm sure others have even had worse stories. But not only that, water quality.
Absolutely.
Thank God we are not Flint, Michigan, but there's a lot of Flints around around the country. So to speak.
There's a lot of places, and interestingly, one of the things I do is track, these historical manifestations. And more often than not, these places do exist. We just hadn't heard about it yet.
That's right.
The cover hadn't been blown, so to speak.
That's right. Right. Jackson, Mississippi, a few years ago.
Absolutely.
I remember when Deion Sanders was still the coach at Jackson State. And there was like several days where they didn't have water. And everything, or there was an issue there with water in Jackson, Mississippi. So thankfully we have not had that kind of problem, but we still do have too many boil water advisories.
Yes,
I see them a lot of times, all over the place on the West Bank, the East Bank, and so those are some of the issues that we as the public we deal with. So please, let's get somebody who knows what they're doing, and let's spend the money that I think we still do have to get these streets fixed and make some good things happen. So we got that going on. Now, I don't know how big of a sports fan you are, but, our Pelicans, our basketball team, had a very, very, and I can say that maybe 5 more times, very, very, very disappointing season. I went to the first game, my son and I, and Zion Williamson, who, was like the big guy from Duke, and they said he was sick. And then in that first game, a guy that we had traded for, DeJounte Murray, he broke something. I forgot in the third quarter.
Okay.
We were expecting him to be like the man.
Yeah.
And so he went down. And then so in this season, we've had times where the whole starting 5 was out.
Yeah.
Which is like almost
gosh.
like unheard of.
Yes.
You know, and everything. So the Gail Benson, who's the owner, of course, of both teams, so they fired the general manager, and so now we have a new general manager who is a Louisiana native, Joe Dumars.
Okay.
And he was a pro, played for the Detroit Pistons, and so he's kind of a homecoming as of sorts. So you know, that gives people hope that there's a new, you know, vision, hopefully, for and being a former player, that he can kind of talk with Zion Williamson, who's this big star, but who hasn't played very much and everything. So people have, you know, I'm saying, keep on hoping, y'all. Keep hope alive.
Sure.
You know. And then, of course, our Saints, we you know, Derek Carr got hurt last season. And now they were waiting for him to come back. Well, a lot of people didn't want him to come back, but he said he was coming back.
Yeah.
And then he announced that he's hurt and that he may be out the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
So the only good news with this is that Deion Sanders' son, Shedeur Sanders, that a lot of analysts are saying that we might pick him as our quarterback, or as the for a quarterback, if we get him in the draft, which is next week. So
what do you think about that?
Ooh,
possibility?
I would love to see that. I mean, I think, you know.
I heard it when you said, woo.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You know, I mean, look, Deion ain't coming. I wish we could get, you know, go 20 years back and bring Deion in too in his prime. But no, I think it'll be exciting. You know, the fan base, I mean, to some people, you know, the Sanders, and of course I'm not related to them, but
Sure.
the Sanders are polarizing, especially Deion. But by all accounts, his son Shedeur is you know, very professional, and you know, the funny thing, he's already a millionaire all by himself.
Yeah.
Because of these NIL deals.
Sure.
You know,
Yes.
I mean, so it's amazing, you know. So he's like,
Yeah.
you know, whereas before people would come to the draft and they're hungry because, you know, I
Absolutely.
need to make some money for my family. And he's like, look, the money is already taken care of.
Right, right.
Like,
So-
put me in the best position so I can win a ring.
Right.
You know, is his thing now.
The pressure
So,
is a little different.
yeah, it's no
Mhm.
pressure, but it's a little different.
Yes.
So, but that would be interesting to get somebody who's, you know, who's that well known and brings that family legacy
Sure.
here and everything. So we shall wait and see
Yeah.
until next week.
I was actually at a Pelicans game this weekend, Sunday, in fact. Was there for an HBCU event,
Okay.
you know, sponsored by the Pelicans and Hennessy. And so,
Okay.
but, you know, I am also very much a college athlete
Okay.
person. Yeah.
Yes.
So I do, you know, am very tuned into college sports, at least as often as I can be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I try to not be too critical when it comes to professional sports, you know,
Yeah.
NFL, NBA, because I come from a city that had neither.
Wow. Now, where's
So
that?
St. Louis,
Okay,
St. Louis,
okay,
we
yes.
had the St. Louis Rams, and so
Yes.
that makes for a whole other segment. Yes, so I'm not even going down that road, and I'm a little bitter about that, so
Yes.
I'll leave that alone. But we lost, you know, the Rams, and so that was, you know, deeply upsetting for us sports fanatics. And then we never had an NBA team, so there's that. So I just try to support where I can and when I can, and just, you know, I'm less critical in that sense.
I hear you. Yeah, and it was also the WNBA draft.
Yeah.
And you know, and I watched it. Like probably almost the whole thing, and I can't remember. That probably was the first time
Sure.
that I watched the entire draft for the WNBA. And so, you know, even as a sports fanatic, you know, it was not until now that I was like, wow, I want to watch the WNBA draft.
Yeah.
And so that shows, though, I mean, things have changed.
Yes, and that's
dramatically,
good.
and that's a great thing.
That's
a
good.
great thing.
They deserve visibility.
Yes,
You know, and
yes.
so they're getting that, you know, in many ways. So yes,
And-
absolutely.
Yeah, and if you didn't pay attention, there's a 6'6" young lady. She's 19 years old. She was raised in France, but she's from the Cameroon, and it's Dominique Malunga. And she was dunking since she was 16 years old.
Ooh.
And they're calling her the female Victor Wembanyama, who, you know, is
Okay.
from France
Yes.
also, who's like 7'3" or 7'4",
Okay.
and plays for the Spurs. And so she's awesome. I can't wait to see her play. I mean, that's like, That's revolutionary.
Sure.
When you talk about women's basketball, to see
Yes.
someone, I mean, she plays, I mean, she moves just like, the best of them, and with that level of height, and can dunk. That's ooh.
Their,
So we
their
can't wait to
seasons
see.
are exciting, and also track and field. I got to throw that out there.
Oh,
Track and
yes,
field, I
yes.
love, so.
Yes.
But
And
it's some good stuff.
gymnastics, too.
Yes, gymnastics, absolutely.
Yeah. So a lot going on the sports, and again, that's part of my protect my peace.
Yes,
You
that's
know,
it.
and I used to be, CNN, MSNBC, and other, junkie, but some of that stuff I just can't take too much
Me
now.
too.
Because the level of ignorance, the insult to our intelligence as human beings that comes from the national level, in terms of from the White House. I just was looking at a few days ago. I just have to say this, and they was in the Oval Office, and the president of El Salvador was there with President Trump, and the reporters were asking about the man who's been basically illegally deported to El Salvador. They said he had no criminal ties or anything, no arrest record, and apparently the administration has requested of El Salvador to bring him back, or to and they sat up in the Oval Office, and President Trump said not a word, while the El Salvadoran president kind of acted like, well, how could I bring him back? What do you want me to smuggle him into the country? And it was like, wow. It's like, you wouldn't be smuggling, because the United States has already asked for him back. There's nothing illegal here. But it was like they're playing mind games. Like all these people say, playing in our faces, right in front of us. And so you see all this going on. It's like, okay, I can't watch this anymore. It's like, if I were a reporter in the Oval,
Yeah.
it's like, come on, y'all. So I mean, and just the level of media these days, the some of them are questioning, but not enough. We need those Watergate era. I forget their names now, but we need that type of reporting and that type of commitment and dedication from media, and not just having propaganda,
Sure.
placed out there and everything. And that's at all levels. But everybody, you got to read for yourself, and
Yeah.
you got to learn how to research. And research is not just going to Google,
Absolutely.
but doing some real research, checking out.
Or social media.
That's right.
not always the best place.
That's right.
It's a great place. You can get legitimate information, but not always.
That's right. And you got to check out. You got to understand what a good source is.
Absolutely.
Who is this telling you this information?
Right.
Right. And where did they get it
Absolutely.
from?
Exactly.
Who sent them?
In other words, what we cannot do is take information on face value.
That's right.
We have to do the work to make sure that we are reading and taking in what is whole.
That's right.
And factual.
That's right.
That's the biggest thing.
That's right.
Factual.
That's right.
And that we have a comprehensive understanding at the end of it for what's going on, not bits and pieces, because that's the other thing.
That's right.
You can hand a few nuggets here and there and still not really capture the gist of what's happening.
Yep.
And so then we walk away with little portions of the story instead of the totality of the story.
That's right.
And so we want to have a full understanding.
That's right. And when doing research on something, look for information that opposes what you believe, and that's where that when you can really find that, and you've looked that through, then when you've challenged yourself. A lot of times people just go looking for information to support their already existing belief, and that ain't research. A real scientist is looking to reject what they believe, or what they do. They call it a hypothesis in research.
Yeah.
And they say, I want to see, this is my hypothesis, but I'm looking for info and for data that's going to say, no, your hypothesis is wrong. That there isn't a relationship between these two things. Am I talking scientific yet?
You are there. You are there.
So we're looking, so you need to really look there and look for that information. There's a story of a professor who gave his class an assignment, and he gave them the assignment on a piece of paper, and he said, this is about a rare bird that lives, in South America. And he gave them the website. He said, I want you to go to this website, and I want you to do a report on this rare bird. and so they went, and the next day or two, they came back, and they all had done their nice reports on this rare bird. And he said, tell me what y'all did to do this paper. And he said, well, we went to the website that you gave us and looked at this, got all the information. And he goes, guess what? That website was bogus. I created that, and there is no such bird. He said, did any of you bother
Looking any other
to
place.
look any place else to see if this, what was on this one site, existed anywhere else?
Point well made.
And nobody had done that. They just all went with this one source.
And I would take that further in terms of how we do society-wise.
Yeah.
And they probably recycled that information and told family members
That's right.
about
That's
the red bird from that one website.
That's right.
Told neighbors, church members, and everybody about the one bird from the red bird. Excuse me, the red bird from the one website.
That's right.
And so we have to be very, very careful. I hammer on that time and time again, and it goes back to even like the beginning of our segment when we were talking about questions.
Mm-hmm.
Ask questions. It's about asking questions and never feeling like you have exhausted yourself in doing that. Because as we're asking questions, the idea is to also be digging.
That's right.
Literally doing the work to get answers.
That's right.
Actual answers, factual answers, you know. So, and learning should be a lifelong process. It's not one and done.
That's right.
You know, or
Very much
so I got something today, I'm good for tomorrow. No, it is ongoing. And so
That's
every day should be an opportunity for us to absorb. And when I say absorb, take in information, you know, and accurate information as best, because we can't afford. That is just the truth. We can't afford to take in anything otherwise.
That's right.
And so, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, and you know, this thing about, you know, looking at facts and you know, there's such a thing as fact checking that some media outlets are doing. And you know, this is really important now. Measles is on the rise, particularly in Texas, and I think it may be now kind of getting out beyond Texas. But you know, the current Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is not a believer in vaccines or in particularly in the measles vaccine. And several weeks ago when he first got in office, he made just a slew of misstatements and misrepresentations about what was going on there in Texas. And I mean, almost immediately, you know, but he spoke it. He's the secretary, the cabinet official. And people are saying, well, if he said it, it must be right. But it was so obvious that he was spinning the information through his own lens, which was already a lens of trying to minimize and not believe that, you know, what was happening was real. And he was immediately fact checked by Texas officials in terms of the reality of the measles outbreak there. And it's like, wow, you know, you have people in authority who just have a disregard for other government officials, whether they be in Texas or wherever, and just want, you know, you want to say what he wants to say and believes what he wants to believe. You can believe what you want to believe, but not when you have other people's lives, you know, and children's lives in your hands.
So there are two things there. One, I'm glad you mentioned measles because it's one example of many, and we could also bring in COVID in some ways for why I encourage people to, you know, chime into the news, but to do it with, you know, to be deliberate about how they do it, right? Like to take it in enough to stay abreast with what is happening in the world. I don't believe that we should be detached and disconnected in such a way until we're oblivious to what's, you know, transpiring around us. But at the same time, it's about making sure that when we do take it in, we don't do it in such a way until it leaves us devastated.
That's
like
right.
You got to have boundaries.
That's right.
And boundaries that, again, are centered in facts.
Facts, and not alternative facts, but a fact is a fact, and you wouldn't think we have to say that in 2025.
And I encourage people, even when you were talking about, you know, misinformation and so forth, and I think you probably do this as well. Encourage people to fact check us.
That's right.
I say, you know, if you hear me say, I don't want you, even with students, don't take what I say for face value.
That's right.
I want you to read sources.
That's right.
Go figure this out and look at this. Double check it, you
That's
know.
right. That's right.
So yeah, it should be consistent.
Hey, it's time for our next break. We'll be taking a quick break, but after the break, we'll be joined by State Representative Mandy Landry with us talking about what's going on in Baton Rouge that's going to affect all of us, and particularly here in the New Orleans area. We'll be right back after the break. Dr. Torrance Sanders, Dr. Andrea Boss, we're here on WBOK, 1230 a.m., the station you listen to all day long.
Why'd I go to the doctor? One day at the firehouse, I was so lightheaded I could barely stand. Even my crew noticed. Getting checked out was the right call. Turns out I have atrial fibrillation, which increases the risk of stroke about 5 times.
Symptoms like irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue, or lightheadedness can come and go. But if it's AFib, the risk of stroke remains. If you have symptoms, contact a doctor.
I'm so glad I did.
Visit notimetowait.com, sponsored by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
This is a story of the one. As a maintenance specialist for University Housing, he knows college students can major in wear and tear. Plus, housing so many students doesn't leave a lot of room to house all the supplies he needs. That's where Grainger comes in. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast, dependable delivery, Grainger carries the quality products he needs so he doesn't have to. From a new door hinge to a whole new faucet. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK.
And good morning. We're here on the Good Morning Show. Dr. Torrance Sanders and Dr. Andrea Boas sitting in for the illustrious Dr. Ashanta Wyatt, who's out today. And we're having a great conversation about everything here and there, protecting your peace and disinformation, misinformation, and getting your facts straight, and just being knowledgeable about what's going on in our community. And speaking of that, we have someone who's very, very knowledgeable about what's happening in our community, and especially in the halls of our Capitol in Baton Rouge, State Representative Mandy Landry. Good morning, State Rep.
Good morning, y'all. How's it going in New Orleans?
Oh,
Good morning.
Right.
Yes.
We're all right. The sun is shining bright, so I'm
Beautiful
all right.
out. Yeah.
Good.
Thanks for joining us here on the Good Morning Show. And so we know the legislature is in session, and I want to hear from you about some of your legislative priorities and things that people are really concerned about. But before we do that, we know you've probably been on WBOK before, but for those who may not have heard you those times, tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll get into some details.
Sure. So I'm one of the state reps right near the station. I represent most of Central City, the Lower Garden and Garden, up to Broadmoor and Hoffman Triangle. And I have served since 2020. My first week here was when COVID was announced in the state. So it's been a rocky few years, to say the least. And I was reelected in 23. Longtime lawyer, been a lawyer for about 20 years. Actually grew up my childhood in Marrero. And family's all still here, kicking around. I have a nephew now.
All right. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Life moves on, you know?
That's right. So, look, I just want to say what's happening in Baton Rouge, but you know, a lot of bills have been pre-filed this session. What's most urgent for you? What do you want to see happen this session?
So all the talk is on insurance, but it's very interesting because a lot of my Republican colleagues and the insurance commissioner keep focusing on auto insurance when all of the rest of us are literally crying for help for homeowners insurance. And so we keep trying to pull the conversation back. We do have, I'm on the insurance committee actually. And if anyone wants to watch exciting insurance committee meetings, we start at 9 this morning. You can watch live, and I'm serious, you can watch live online, legis.la.gov. And we have some homeowners bills this morning. And it's been just a little weird to see the governor and the insurance commissioner sort of fighting publicly, trying to blame each other. But, I mean, are you surprised by that?
Yeah.
So we have a lot of good bills. There's some bills out of New Orleans about fortified roofs. There's another bill by a Democrat about credit reports. There's a lot of companies that will use your credit report in figuring out your policy amount. I mean, especially for people in New Orleans and in Louisiana in general. That's going to hurt your number and raise your policy. So I have some hopes for some of this, but these guys need to stop fighting.
Wow. Yeah, we have with us Dr. Andrea Boyles here also. I think she has a question specifically for you also.
Yes, good morning, Representative Landry. It's so good to have you on. I have a question regarding housing.
Sure.
So tenant protections, more specifically. I know that that's been part of your focus for legislative work. And so we're interested in knowing, are there any new bills you're sponsoring this session to further safeguard renters' rights, especially in the aftermath of natural disasters?
So that's the bill you're talking about. I did a few years ago about if you have to evacuate after, hurricane flooding event, you can't be evicted, which is terrible that we have to have a law that says that. But we do have that now that you're protected. A lot of tenants they wanted to get the insurance money, so they were locking people out. I don't have a tenant protection bill this year, but I do have an affordable housing bill that would be wonderful if we can get it through. A lot of people are working on it. It's really hard to build affordable housing in a city like New Orleans in particular. It's really expensive. And these entities, they often can't do it unless there are the federal housing tax credits. And it's a long process to get approved for those credits. The state has to approve it. The Board of Zoning has to approve the development. And often at the end, they're tied up in city politics for as long as a year sometimes. So what we're trying to do is approve the projects, get the projects approved before they get to that entangled web at the end, to shorten the process, to get the projects built faster, and so that developers won't be scared to start building them. And so far, from top to bottom, everyone's like, yes, let's get this done.
Wow. Yeah, we definitely need more affordable housing.
Yes.
I know there's a report done every year by their organization, and New Orleans kind of gets a C or D every year. So hopefully that can change. And I know on how you mentioned insurance initially and homeowners insurance, and I think, is it Representative Duplessis who filed the bill for a discount if you have your fortified roof?
Yes. His is a 20%, and then there's also discussions about making it sort of a band, like between 20 and 30 or something like that. The companies are fighting it, but we need to have some assurance for people that they will get a discount, a substantial discount.
Yeah, because if you're gonna do that, which and I know there's a grant program out there. I don't know, how much of that money remains, if any at all. But it seemed like it was like a lottery system to get the grants or what have you. But if that's going to help, so people won't have to file claims because the roofs will hold during a storm, then definitely there should be a reward for that.
No, absolutely, and your companies will give it. It's just they can't guarantee if they're going to give you 3% or 30% or 40%. And I think the idea is to guarantee a minimum that you're going to get at least such and such amount.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So can we talk about education for a moment? That's always a big issue.
Yes, it will be.
Yeah, voters and it's interesting because this is a fiscal session, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. But I know, voters, just, statewide, voted down all 4 of those amendments. And one of them seemingly, and I say seemingly, called for this teacher pay raise. But I know after study, it wasn't, to me, as clear-cut as it seemed to be written in the amendment. But could you talk about teacher pay raise and school support worker pay raise and what's being done perhaps to make that happen?
Yeah, there's a few bills about that. I think Royce had one too about teacher pay raise. I can't remember what it does. But there's one member who brought back the idea from the amendments, which is a little complicated, but it would essentially use some savings the state has to pay down the teachers' retirement debt. I don't know why the teachers' retirement system has a ton of debt, but they have a ton of debt. No idea why. So the interest on that is crazy. So the idea was to pay down some of that debt to lower the interest, and then your local, your parishes and local areas won't have to be paying into that debt, and then they can pay their teachers. I am not an accountant, However, people who understand money say that would work. The problem with that being in the amendment is it was in the amendment with 12 other things.
Yes.
And it's hard to understand. So is that going to work? I'm not sure just yet, but it is on the table.
Okay.
Okay. Also, I would like to ask a criminal justice related question. That's always, an issue, particularly surrounding funding. And so I'm curious to know, with increased funding being proposed for law enforcement and corrections, how do you propose balancing public safety with the need for criminal justice reform and support for reentry programs?
Goodness, they keep cutting all the money for the things that we need. To me, if you're going to add funding, like you said, on the back end per se, you need to add it on the front. That has been, I'm just going to be honest, that has been very difficult to get a lot of people here to understand that you really have to invest very early on with the kids. And then for people who are incarcerated, you really have to give them opportunities when they're in there. And it just has been hard to do that and increase that funding. And we know, I get a lot of requests from people incarcerated to try to help them move. And if you're listening, 99.9% of the time I can't, but I try. And often it's people who say, I want to go to this other place for the classes they have. I want to learn a trade, and we don't have enough. So I'm sorry I can't be more positive on that. It's just kind of the lay of the land here right now.
Yeah, and you have to go at 8:00, but Democrats we know are in the minority there. But what's the overall kind of feeling? What's the mood up there, so to speak, kind of behind the scenes? Is there a mood to work together across the aisle at all, or is there a mood of strict partisanship, or somewhere in between?
So you kind of hit a very interesting nail on the head. I've been thinking, and some of us have been talking, is that while a lot of the Republicans are fighting, Democrats are kind of just sitting there quietly working on getting our bills through, staying out of the line of fire. I have some stuff going through that as of right now, I have a lot of interesting support, and it's happening in part because the attention's focused elsewhere. And you're right, we are a minority. There aren't that many of us. We can't affect a lot, but we can certainly make sure that we make friends and that we aren't the ones being attacked. There's enough people out there for that they can fight together. We're doing well. We're being quiet. I'm getting my stuff done.
Yeah.
So.
And just I know this is a federal issue and we're probably going off, but I just want to, there's been so much talk about just in the paper today about visas of students being removed and everything. And of course, there's threats to higher education in general. Any thoughts about our state and higher education system? And we know there's always bills that will affect the higher education.
There are some bills, now that you mention, about that are, I guess I would call them anti-immigrant or something like that. There is stuff going on right now. My sister teaches in a surrounding parish, and they received information about scrubbing DEI from, elementary school workbooks sort of thing. There's definitely been that in the state. It started last year. There's definitely efforts to try to remove tenure and get rid of professors. And a lot of it is done under the false promise of free speech when it's not. It's shutting down speech. So we will continue to see some of that. We also are moving UNO into the LSU system. That's getting a lot of attention from the higher ed world. But so far, like I said, insurance and education, as you brought up, are the main topics up here right now.
Okay. Well, wow. Well, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Yes,
any final thoughts you'd like to share with the WBOK community?
Hey, I think people should watch and pay attention. Just tune in sometimes when we're on the floor. You can message me or email me where to find it. It's pretty fascinating when I get one of my friends to watch and they say, I didn't know that's how y'all did things. Get involved. Just watch a day or two and you will be surprised to see how your laws are made.
Yes. Well, hey, thank you. Have a great day.
You're welcome.
I know you're working hard for us, so keep working hard, and tell all our friends in the New Orleans delegation that WBOK says hello.
I sure will.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hey, we'll be taking our
Bye-bye.
break, and we'll be right back after the break. Dr. Torrance Sanders, Dr. Andrea Boyles on WBOK, 1230 a.m., the station you listen to all day long.
WBOK New Orleans, home of the Good Morning Show, 7 to 9 a.m. weekdays.
This news report is brought to you by New Schools for New Orleans.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know with BIN News. The Supreme Court ruled President Trump can fire 2 independent agency watchdogs, reversing a lower court decision. Affected are members of the National Labor Relations Board and Merit Systems Protection Board. Arguments from the officials' lawyers will be heard next. New York City Mayor Eric Adams allows ICE to set up an office at Rikers Island for criminal investigations. Critics, including Black City Council Speaker Adrian Adams, say this endangers New Yorkers and supports Trump's deportation policies. Transgender pilot Joe Ellis sues conservative influencer Matt Wallace for falsely linking her to the D.C. plane crash that killed 67 people. Wallace's viral posts led Ellis to fear for her safety, requiring private security. And a Minecraft movie is set to dominate the box office again, expected to make $65 to $82 million this weekend. It debuted with $162 million, the best opening of the year. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
New Schools for New Orleans is committed to celebrating the hardworking teachers of New Orleans Public Schools. Join us at the 4th annual NOLA Teacher Fest, sponsored by the All-State Sugar Bowl New Orleans teacher community. The NOLA Teacher Fest is happening Friday, May 2nd at Champion Square from 4 to 7 p.m. The fest is open to teachers, paraprofessionals, deans, coaches, counselors, and other school support staff. Visit our website to learn more and RSVP, www.newschoolsforneworleans.org.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK.
And we're back. Hey, 8:03 in our second hour this morning. Wow, time is flying by already.
It is,
Dr.
yes.
Boyles? Yeah, well, we want to thank our state rep, Mandy Landry, who's working in Baton Rouge on your behalf right now. We talked about several bills. Of course, she's saying that insurance and education are at the top of the agenda. And unfortunately, more talk about auto insurance, which is an issue. I do believe Louisiana has one of the highest, if not the highest, auto insurance rates. So we would like to see that go down. But perhaps even more important is the homeowners insurance rates and issues. And I know because people have seen some terrible increases there, which only makes it unlivable to remain in their homes. And so, hey, at least, if I can't afford my car, I can still take the bus or Uber. But I need my house. I need a place to live.
Yeah, for sure.
So, any thoughts about what she said to us, Dr. Boyles?
I'm just always interested in, and that's why those were the questions I asked about housing and then also public safety, because I know that typically when we start discussing budgets, there's always a large and overwhelming segment of the budget that goes to public safety. And that's important, but also what gets lost in that usually is that, are people who are disproportionately subject to the criminal justice system, either going in, coming out, or otherwise. And so we often don't have that conversation. It's one around protection, but protection in the sense of increasing law enforcement, that kind of thing, but not protection in the sense of increasing or improving the quality of life and people's ability to productively integrate or reintegrate back into society, or to proactively be able to have a quality of life, a conventional quality of life, and not feeling pressured or pressed in various ways to, engage in disorder, if that is the case, or criminal behavior even. So, yeah, that was important. And then, like I said, housing, the housing issue. I think it is a certain reminder day after day, being, present and seeing our unhoused brothers and sisters, from one street to the next or what have you, particularly in the downtown area. It's just a reminder of how very crucial it is to have affordable housing and what kinds of efforts are happening, in that vein. So I don't know that, I guess to kind of refer to some of what she said, she said she hated to not have a positive, response and, paraphrasing or what have you. But I think it is important that we be real about these things, even if it's not what we want to hear. We do need the truth. And so I appreciate having that conversation with Representative Landry as well.
Yeah. And there are several other bills that I was looking up and that I want to talk about just briefly. In fact, Representative Matthew Willard has a bill to increase the homestead exemption. Currently, it's $7,500, and the bill is to increase it to $12,500. And of course, the homestead exemption is very, very popular, and politicians would not touch it in the negative by any means. I would suspect, the increase, the reason for increase, one would be inflation, perhaps, but also just to then help. It's a way to help homeowners who may be dealing with higher insurance rates and other rates to then recoup some money then on this end, in terms of the higher homestead exemption. So I think that's an interesting bill and approach to do that, and probably will get a lot of support, I would suspect. And but then you just mentioned the unhoused. And there are two bills, I believe, but I know one filed by our local rep, Alonzo Knox, to ban, as they call it, public camping.
Sure.
Public, and I just thought that's an interesting way to put it. Is there public camping? I said, when I think camping, and now I'm not an outdoorsman, but when I think about going camping, I'm thinking, wow, let's go spend a weekend somewhere to go camp. But they refer to it as public camping, but of course they're referring to encampments and the homeless. And so there's a bill to ban it, and apparently the U.S. Supreme Court has address the issue of whether or not municipalities can remove people, and enforce these types of laws, and so this bill also would require them to enforce that law, and so to ban public camping. And I know good people may have different opinions on this. On the one side, I hear like to hear your view. People say, I feel for the homeless, but they shouldn't be allowed to camp out anywhere in public. And then the others was like, well, but if they don't have a place to stay, then what's your problem with letting people find a place wherever they can, whether it's in the open or not? Any thoughts on what do you think about that debate?
Well, again, it goes back to my conversation and my work on disorder. Mm-hmm. And so I'm less compelled to blame the folks that are, are unhoused. Mm-hmm. I think that that's a situation, particularly right now, even in the present, that can certainly be experienced by all sorts of folks,
a few things
across the aisle.
Yes,
that didn't necessarily anticipate an economic downturn in a particular way. But I understand processes, and I understand that, this is bigger than the 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 individuals, whatever that number might be. Mm-hmm. This is big, certainly bigger than them. Mm-hmm. And so there are systems and there are processes that make our environment conducive for unhousing.
Yeah.
And so that's where my, that's what gets my attention. And I also, just to keep it real, so to speak, I understand how, that might be, a nuisance, visualized or perceived as an eyesore in different ways, for people who are in and out of certain areas that may, or become, feel compromised, their business is compromised and things like that. But what I will still say is that at the end of the day, I put things in perspective. And the way to eliminate that is not to start with the people who have the least amount of power, but to start working that angle and improving that with grievances being expressed toward the people with the most power, the people who are in position to make that be different, and not different by simply replacing and displacing and, rearranging spaces where homelessness might be, but making sure that we eliminate it would be the, the agenda.
And you're right. And you're right on it. Cause I would say a law like this would be good if you also had a companion law, to say, what about rent control?
Absolutely.
Like they have in New York and other places, because the rents have gone sky high. And to some extent, some people say maybe some of that is even gouging, price gouging to some extent, because of the new, with the changes in the housing market and all the other things.
And funding social services in general.
Yeah.
So rent control, yes, affordable housing, and which is the same one and the same in many respects. We can also pass a law that says you're right, X percentage of all housing has to be affordable housing. So, but making sure people have access, to mental health, resources, addiction issues, all kinds of things that overlap, that there's a correlation. And more often than not, that funding tends to go to public safety. So there's a full circle.
Yep.
And how,
that's right.
We just talked about the public safety issue. So that tends to get chopped.
Yes.
And much of it will go to, policing and that kind of thing, and not.
Then it becomes a vicious cycle.
Yes.
We wouldn't need as much law enforcement if we had more people who had treatment for mental health.
Yes.
And
if
substance
we worked
abuse.
on improving the quality of life for people.
That's right.
Yes.
So, we have to look at it, again, from a full point of view. A lot of times it's easy, again, just to say, well, let's stop that because I don't like how that looks in terms of the public encampments. But how did they get there?
Yes.
And what are the legal steps? Also, things we need to change in our structure so that won't happen. Now, are there a few people, percentage wise, who will say, I just want to be here and everything? Perhaps.
Yeah.
But that would be negligible compared to.
But by and large, that's not the story. People are not choosing to have
and if
no,
they are, then maybe they have a mental health issue. For the most part, that they're out there. There's also another bill which I think probably should pass, may pass, but also by Representative Matthew Willard, where he's following a lot of interesting bills to criminalize unsafe gun storage. And if you paid attention to the media a little bit, even the last 2 years especially, and there have been several instances in which children have been killed by getting a hold of loaded weapons. In the homes, and so this bill would go towards criminalizing unsafe gun storage. I haven't read it yet, but but that's the gist of it. What do you think about that bill?
Well, some of these things are, it's just interesting in and of itself, especially as the access to guns is easier. I have long argued, that it seems to access or even have a gun is much easier than to have housing or to have quality education and those kinds of things. So I think these are extensions, or at least, reactive responses, because there are so many guns on the street, and people who have them may not necessarily know how to properly, or may not be, as vested in keeping them out of harm's way, keeping them safe. But to criminalize, that is probably, given the work that I do criminologically, that is probably going to be another route to criminalize poor people.
Yeah. Well, it's a tragedy all around.
Disproportionately, at least. Yes.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a tragedy when we hear of those stories. And, it's what's also a tragedy is that the gun lobby, refuses to allow or to support, reasonable gun measures to make sure we can keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them in the first place, to do the, all the checks and everything. And then that would also lead to the appropriate education. I mean, I can't get in my car unless I take a test and check my eyes. I gotta talk to somebody, and I guess sound like I got some sense, right? Although I'm sure if I went to the DMV and I was acting a fool, I wouldn't get my license.
Sure.
So to speak. And so we do that for cars, but
not so much for a firearm.
Not for a firearm, which can much, in a sense, I would say more easily do so much damage. And so, at the same time, is that we want some accountability for people who just are reckless.
Yes.
With a weapon when you have children around, and all of that, and I've worked enough with children, and we go, I've seen parents, they don't know where I keep my gun. And I said, go ask them.
Yeah.
And, well, Daddy keeps his gun such and such. And the parents are like,
they know.
Oh my God, how did you, children.
They watch everything.
Children watch, children get.
And listen. So even if they don't see it, they hear you talking about it, perhaps.
I have a funny story. It doesn't relate to guns, but when my oldest son, who's now 29, when he was a little boy, and he was sick, and so we were taking him to the doctor, my wife and I. He was in the back seat in his car seat. My wife and I are talking. And we said, well, I hope he doesn't have the measles. Now, he had gotten his shots, but we was like, this thing looks like it could be the measles. And so, we were talking low, trying not to have him listening. We get to the doctor, and the doctor goes, so, young man, what's going on here today? He goes, I think I have the weasels. Not measles, of course, weasels.
Right.
And my wife and I both looked at him like
the weasels.
Like, what?
Oh, my
and it was like, first, we didn't think he was paying attention, that he was listening. And the doctor broke out. We all broke out laughing about the weasels. But it was like, wow. It's like you really have to, even when you think they're not listening and paying attention.
They are paying attention.
And so imagine, people say, yeah, I put the gun up. And they right on it.
Yes.
So we have to, we definitely need to be more mindful.
So there's loose, and by all means, I do think that, that we need to be, there needs to be some accountability, and folks need to certainly be responsible about handling firearms. So I would not deter from that. But the point is, if you have loose legislation that allows overwhelming and unlimited access, then also we should then anticipate accidents, loose reactions and loose responses, and in that sense, in terms of how people house them.
That's right. And think about it, it's so easy. If you're gonna buy a gun, then buy a case to put the gun in.
Buy is the key. Buy.
Get one,
because you have it to buy, right?
Well, if you got the gun some kind of way, so you
can seriously, people can find guns.
Oh, that's true
like,
too.
Kids.
Yes.
Even in that sense. So when we talk about, how guns are being kept, also it's important to not just think about that context within the frame of one's household.
Mm-hmm.
What about the guns that are thrown in the street, throwaways, and that kind of thing? And kids pick them up while out playing, while out walking, to the bus stop, whatever the case might be. So it's not just, this conventional thing. Folks are legitimately going to the gun store and somehow purchasing.
Right.
That's not always how people come in contact with guns or come to be able to assess them, adults or children. So that's important too to consider in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And then I guess this last bill that really got my attention was short-term rentals and increasing the taxes on them. Now, of course, the backdrop is last year, I guess that was last year, time's flying, but, where there was a big battle in city council in terms of limiting the number of short-term rentals on a block. I think they had come to like one per block, and everything. There was like a lottery in terms of, who would get chosen and all of that. And, the other side, of course, for, many people, this is a main source of income. In terms of maybe retired people, who haven't, have already, own a home and, need extra income and everything, especially in this economy. And so, but a lot of people have argued also that short-term rentals, the proliferation is kind of, tearing neighborhoods apart. making them unlivable, unaffordable, so to speak. And so this measure, though, this bill is to increase the taxes on short-term rentals. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to decrease, if that's the intent, to short-term rentals, or just again to bilk them for for a little bit more money, so that whatever costs that the city bears associated with that would come into the city coffers. Any thoughts on that? You have any friends, people who have short-term rentals or Airbnbs or whatever?
Absolutely. And to be transparent, I myself had to rely on it,
Okay.
in my transition from St. Louis to New Orleans, but that was short term, literally, exactly what it meant, but still, even in that, that's privilege for me. And I do recognize that can certainly in different ways be disadvantageous for other people. And so I holistically am all about how do we improve and work in ways that improve, the quality of life, economically and otherwise, for all people, particularly people who are struggling. People who have the least amount of power. I go back to that every time, because I think that they tend to get the blame for all things. And so I like to start at the top. Oftentimes when we're talking about economics, we always hear the arguments of the trickle down effect. If you enrich the top, it's going to trickle down, and everybody else will get their fair share.
Still waiting on the trickles.
And so my thing is, we are to start that process similarly when it comes to the fix.
Yes.
Let the fix be trickled down.
Come on,
Let's not start from the bottom up. When we start talking about resolving social issues, let's also start from the top down when it comes to addressing them.
Yes. I love that. I love that. Did you trademark that yet?
I have. It's all wrapped and packaged in my
right.
arguments for disorder.
Yeah.
And what that really means.
Yes. Well, so we'll see what happens with all of these bills. And as State Representative Landry said, yes, pay attention. You can, if you have your phone, your smartphone, your laptop, your whatever device you have, and you can log on to the state legislature. Just Google that, and you can live and go on live and see exactly what they're doing and what's going on and how it will affect you and I. I was impressed and proud that people went to the polls and voted for during that election that was supposed to be a low turnout, and it still wasn't groundbreaking turnout, but at 30% plus. For an election that was thought to be only 12% turnout, was indeed a great thing. But there are other elections coming up, and we're still going to have to break and do better than 30%. And especially when it comes up to the next gubernatorial election, where over 600,000 Black folks sat it out. And just them alone, just us alone, statewide, could have, picked the governor of our choosing. As we could get ready to have our break, there's another data piece that is interesting for me in terms of from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and it talks about you've been talking about quality of life throughout the morning, and life expectancy is the ultimate quality of life. How long are people living, and that's a numerical measure of a lot of things in terms of that bears on quality of life. And the United States life expectancy is 76.4 years. So 76 years, that's where we are as a country. In Louisiana, though, it's 72.2. So our life expectancy here, 72 years old, as opposed to nationwide, 76 years old. But there's one parish that the news is reporting here in Louisiana where life expectancy is above the U.S. rate, and that's Cameron Parish. Where they have a life expectancy of 78 years, 78.5 years in terms of their life expectancy. So everybody pack up and moved to Cameron. Now, of course, it says they only got about a couple of thousand people in Cameron Parish. And if you know where Cameron Parish is, somebody call in 504-582. I can look it up, y'all. But 9422. Somebody maybe from Cameron Parish and tell me why y'all living so long out there. What food y'all eating? You know, what y'all doing out there? But St. Tammany Parish also is 76.5. Which is right almost at the U.S. rate. Ascension Parish, 76.3, right below the U.S. rate. And then Lafayette Parish, 75.8. Again, so, of course, now, I should have gotten Orleans Parish, but we ain't in the top 10 of the parishes in terms of life expectancy. So, and of course, you know, I'm joking, but that's a real thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are real factors which is weighing against the longevity of our time here.
Absolutely. And that was the thing that came to my mind when you said that they had their numbers were even above, in Cameron Parish were above even the U.S. average. Mm-hmm. My immediate thought, because I don't know where Cameron Parish is, but I was curious about the demographics.
Yeah.
That was my immediate thought. And also because there are studies that look at life expectancy across zip codes and area codes. So
Yes.
there's a slew of resources that we can go to that literally track that, you know, and it tells us a lot based off of what those demographics are within those area codes or in those spaces, those zip codes. Yeah.
Wikipedia to the rescue. So as of Cameron Parish is in the southwest corner of the United States of Louisiana.
Okay.
Its population in the 2020 census was 5,617. That's the whole parish. The whole parish.
Got it.
And then the parish seat is Cameron. And then although it is the largest parish by area in Louisiana, it has the second smallest population in the state, ahead of only Tensas Parish. Now, in demographics, 92% white, 3.3% Black or African American, and smaller percentages for Native American, Asian, Native Hawaiian, etc. So, talking about 5,000 people, and but they living long. So I don't know if we all gonna move to Cameron Parish, y'all. Just if just a few of us from that go to a football game, we could double their population here, you know, in Cameron Parish. But life expectancy, there are things we can do better on our own in terms of, protecting our peace. And that also means, being active, taking, health, taking your medicine if you got to take your medicine, exercising, educating ourselves about diet and all those kinds of things. And but there are a lot of things that are out of our control that we are faced to deal with, such as pollution,
absolutely,
and violence, and a lot of those other things that we need to be about, seriously in terms of changing and everything. So hey, at the 8:30 in a little while, we're going to have a talk about domestic violence and sexual assault. We're going to be joined by Jocelyn Pinkerton, social worker, who's the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Program Director for the City of New Orleans Health Department, and from the Police Department, the Special Victims Division, Sergeant Howard will be with us talking about these very, very important topics on a Wednesday. They call it Hump Day here on WBOK, 12:30 a.m., the station you listen to all day long. We'll be right back.
Hello, friend. Tavis Smiley here with a special announcement. You can catch my show at a new time. Weekdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Same great topics, same great guests, same great conversations, just a little earlier in the day. It's Tavis Smiley, weekdays 1 to 4 p.m. only on WBOK 1230 a.m. What New Orleans is talking about.
NOLA Public Schools is excited for the rest of this 24-25 school year journey with our families, watching our students dive into learning, growth, and success. As the school year continues, our dedicated educators are focused on keeping every student engaged and motivated. Let's keep embracing new challenges, celebrating achievements, and supporting each other to make the rest of this year even more impactful. Stay connected with your school and NOLA PS through our social media channels for updates and resources. We're here to help our scholars attend today, achieve tomorrow.
This is a test of the emergency alert system. This is only a test. This has been a test of the emergency alert system.
This summer, let your child's creativity shine at Camp Art, New Orleans' most vibrant, arts-driven camp experience for kids ages 4 to 12. Hosted by Beyond the Stage, Camp Art blends visual art, theater, music, dance, and creative writing with New Orleans history and culture. Plus, field trips, guest artists, and camper showcases. With full-day programming before and after care and sessions starting June 9th, it's the perfect fit for working parents. Fun, enriching, unforgettable. Register now at beyondthestagellc.com/campart. And follow us on social media at Beyond the Stage LLC.
Making a difference in the community. WBOK 1230 AM.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK.
And we're back. We're back. Welcome to the Good Morning Show again. This is Dr. Torrance Sanders, along with Dr. Andrea Boyles, your co-host for this morning, sitting in for the illustrious Dr. Ashanta White, who's out on vacay. Thanks for joining us. We've had a great morning talking with State Rep Mandy Landry about what's happening in Baton Rouge. And then, of course, great discussion, huh, Doc Boyles, with just all kind of things, protecting our peace.
Yes, that's the biggest part. Yeah,
with all the chaos going on, take care of yourself. Go see a festival. All right?
Yes.
Go to a festival. Go do something. Or just get a beignet. Not too many, but get a beignet. Do something that you enjoy. But we are joined here now in studio by two wonderful guests. We have Jocelyn Pinkerton. Is it Jocelyn?
That's correct.
Pinkerton, a fellow social worker. I'm a social worker too.
Excellent.
LCSW, head of the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault program for the City of New Orleans Health Department, and from the NOPD, our Special Victims Division, Sergeant Howard.
Yes.
Good morning. Welcome to the Good Morning Show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Good morning.
Thank you all for being with us. And we know we're here to discuss a serious topic. But before we get into that, why don't we I hear first our listeners want to hear just a little bit about who you are and what kind of drew you to the work that you do. Why don't we start with you first, Ms. Pinkerton?
Sure. So my name is Jocelyn, and I work on our domestic and sexual violence program at the City of New Orleans Health Department. We are under our Office of Violence Prevention. And like you said, I am a proud social worker.
There you go.
Tulane grad.
All right.
And so it really brought me into this work, serving my community. I used to work directly with survivors and do counseling and therapy with folks, and then moved over to the health department several years ago. And we really look at sexual and domestic violence as a public health issue. And it's something that I feel really passionate about. So I'm really proud to work for the city.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Sergeant Howard.
Yes, sir.
Tell us right now, are you the iced tea version or
actually that's my exact job actually. That's exactly what I do.
Tell us who you are and
yes.
what
Well, my
you do
name
this
is
work, yeah.
Sergeant Ron Howard. I've been with the police department for 18 years.
Wow.
I've been doing
Congratulations.
special victims work for about 5 years now. And I kind of fell into it. You know, I've done all the platoon work. I've been an FTO, and before I got into special victims, I was a persons crimes detective in the 8th district. Then it just came a call, and it kind of fell in my lap, and I fell in love with the work. You know, because special victims they need assistance, and I just felt like I can actually sink my teeth in that work.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, just Ms. Pinkerton, can I call you Jocelyn?
Sure, of course, please.
Can you give us just a snapshot of the current landscape of domestic violence, sexual violence in New Orleans? Any trends or particular concerns?
Sure. So I want to start off by saying, like I said, that we really look at domestic and sexual violence as very connected to community violence, and we really see violence in general as a public health issue. This is something that does not just affect victims and survivors, but it really affects our whole community. It affects families, it affects people's ability to do their jobs, and so it's something that we take really seriously. And we're really looking for how to improve responses to survivors and victims, and we're also looking at how to prevent violence from happening in the first place. And it's all connected.
Yeah. And Sergeant Howard, I'm sure you two work hand in hand.
Yes, sir.
You know, what are some of the challenges that you face in your work when, again, you get the call and there's been a victim? What are some of the challenges that you face in your work? And what can the public do, if anything, to help you in your work?
The biggest thing is don't be afraid to report it. So we get a lot of people angry with us because there's not a lot of stuff that we do, but if we don't know, it's hard for us to do anything. So report it any way you can. Don't be afraid to do so. A lot of times that we get victims who are possibly ashamed that this incident took place, you know, so we want to let them know, hey, look, it's not your fault, and say something, you know. So once we get there, everything kind of falls into place. We try to get them to the hospital, get them to the same nurse to speak with them the right way, ask the right questions the first time so they don't have to relive the incident, and let us do our jobs from there. You know, that's the most important.
Yeah, Dr. Boyes.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions,
Go ahead.
actually,
I'm here all day.
but I was listening to you, and I guess my first thought was, what if you will share specifically might you all do or that you offer or others could do to break through the shame, right? The embarrassment of it all. So we know that fear is certainly a component when people are actively experiencing various forms of violence,
Yes.
Domestic and sexually, but then also the shame. And so how do people break through?
So it's kind of
without, and then let me add, without blaming. Having
Right. And
the survivor be blamed
That's the number one
for
thing.
the behavior.
So we don't want to victim blame. And
Absolutely.
most times, a victim would tell their friend first. And I'm trying to say this the right way. So we want to let them know if somebody tells you that they've been assaulted in this way, don't be afraid to report it yourself, you know, and we'll follow up. We have to follow everything up. So we get the report, say, hey, look, my friend was assaulted by this person, or however that goes. You can say something and allow us to try to make contact with them, or have a social worker to make contact with them as well, so that we can at least speak to them so they won't feel that shame or even have to bear the burden of coming to us, because that's probably the hardest part, you know.
Yeah.
Just making the call.
And so, Justin, what are some of the array of services? I know it's because you're the health department. I mean, do y'all coordinate everybody, or so tell explain your role, and then what are the array of services that people can access once they have the need?
That's right. We do a lot of coordination. So like Sergeant Howard said, some folks, the first step is really speaking up, and whether or not that's to a friend or a family member or making a report. But we work with a lot of fantastic service providers throughout the city. So we have sexual assault advocates, we have counselors, case managers. We have our nurses at the hospital who are going to take great care of folks if they go into the University Medical Center. And we have our NOPD, we have our detectives and our social workers. We work really closely together. We actually all meet once a month to review cases to make sure everyone's on the same page and that we're following up and doing everything that we need to do to support victims and survivors. And people might have a lot of different needs. They might need some legal assistance, so we have attorneys that are available. They might need some medical help. They might really want to make a report to the police department, or they might just want someone to talk to. And so we have some really fantastic organizations like Sexual Trauma Awareness and Response called STAR. They have counselors and attorneys and case managers available. We have the New Orleans Family Justice Center is another fantastic organization, and the nurses over at the University Medical Center. All these folks, including NOPD Sex Crimes Division, they're all specially trained in how to really respond. I think the first thing, like Sergeant Howard said, is just start by believing. So really believe everyone that comes forward.
Yes. We have a phone call on line 1. Welcome. Good morning, Noonie.
Hello, Pastor Sanders. How you doing?
I'm excellent. Good morning to you.
All right, I have a couple of comments. First, I want to commend STAR. STAR is a great program. They're helping young ladies out here. They're doing good work. Now, what I'm going to say, I got a comment, but this not towards the brother Howard on there, but maybe he can answer the question, maybe he can't. I deal with a lot of young ladies that sexual assault. I'm dealing with a couple of ladies right now where the case has been covered up by the NOPD because of connections with sexual assaults. And then a lot of children has been molested. We got pedophiles. We got all these connections going on. So when I hear that a lot of people are scared to come out, that ain't the truth. A lot of people has came out. In 2014, we looked at the sexual assault unit, the domestic unit, the rape unit, the special victim unit, and the crimes was covered up. We dealing in 2025, Pastor Sanders, and we're meeting the same thing, and we have proven it to the NOPD. So at the end of the day, my question is to the brother, what are y'all going to do about that? And if you want to sit together, we can sit. So be careful when you say I'm not telling the truth, because I got the paperwork to prove it, and we know cops have covered it up. And I'm going to call their names. Captain, what her name? Sheila Cecile, Letitia LeJean. They have covered up cases. Sonia Perrier, that whole sexual assault unit have covered up cases. Special victims have covered up cases. And correct me and tell me if I'm lying, y'all just got a new commander to take over the cases, but at the end of the day, these children and these women are suffering in the community. And at the end of the day, it's a cover-up. So at the end of the day, I don't like when people go on a show and be on the show just showing out. Y'all special victims unit is a disgrace, and y'all not protecting our children, y'all not protecting our women, and y'all not protecting the kids. And at the end of the day, the sexual assault unit is the worst in the country. So I'm about to get off here, Pastor Sanders.
Thank you, man.
I'm going to respect your gray hair.
Thank you, man. Bye.
Yeah.
Take care.
Like Noonie has a lot of pent up. Maybe we do need to have a conversation. I think that's a little bit much for the amount of time that we have. But we're not in the business of covering up these kind of crimes. Actually, as a matter of fact, they're all public. Everything's public about what we do. So Lord knows that would be the last thing we want to do. As a matter of fact, Lieutenant Silius, who I work for directly, is doing a great job with putting things out there for us to be able to do our jobs the right way. We actually got about 8 new detectives to work on to keep the workload down so we can get to the cases properly and different things like that. And with the assistance of our social workers and everything, we're trying to get to everybody as best we can, but in no way, shape, or form that we are in the business of covering up cases. That's not what we do.
And I heard on the news maybe last week or so about the DNA kits.
Yes, sir.
And the backlog. And I know some of that backlog has been dramatically decreased, but there's still some there. Could you talk a little bit about that? I don't know who would be the best person.
So I want to say that we work really hard to improve our responses, and part of that is the DNA kit testing. So we've gotten investment from actually Representative Landrieu, who you just spoke with, and from our city council to invest money in clearing the backlog. There's so many cases, and that attests to the fact that people are coming forward. Yeah. And so we are happy that people are coming forward. When we see our numbers go up, that's actually a good thing, because that means that people feel comfortable reporting. Yeah. That also means that we have a lot more test kits to test, and we don't have the capacity at the state lab. So that's why we invested the funding to outsource a lot of our test kits. And once our City of New Orleans Crime Lab comes online in 2027, I think we'll see some real improvements with our testing ability.
Yes, there has been improvement to the crime lab. Every test kit needs to be transported to Baton Rouge and tested with them. So it takes time for the things to come back. So.
All right. We got to take a quick break, but we'll be back in a few moments. Dr. Boyles, Dr. Sanders, Sergeant Howard, and Jocelyn Pinkerton with the City of New Orleans. We're going to talk a little bit more about domestic violence and what's being done to help prevent it and to address it here in the City of New Orleans on WBOK, 1230 a.m., the station you listen to all day long.
Hi, this is Cary Grant. Let's elevate every Tuesday through Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. as we discuss the community, the country, and the world, from politics to current events and sports. We look forward to your input and continuing the quality programming on your community station, WBOK. Join us every Tuesday through Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. on Elevated Conversations, the Arnie and Cary Show.
New Orleans, if you know a young adult or you are a young adult, listen up. This is your chance to level up your future.
Job One's Young Adult Career Expo is going down April 16th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at 1307 Oritha Castle Haley Boulevard.
Put on your best outfit, grab your resume, and meet employers from across the city.
Some of them might even hire you on the spot. This is your moment. Get ready with Job One.
Tell a teen, tell a cousin, tell everybody 16 and up. Register now at job1nola.org.
Paid for by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act.
Hey everybody, it's Kimber White Dupree.
And it's Graylin Bryant Banks from the front porch. We're coming up next.
Good morning, Wake Up.
The Good Morning Show.
Good morning.
On WBOK.
A few moments left in the Good Morning Show this morning on this Wednesday, this hump day, but having a great conversation about domestic violence. I'm going to give it to Dr. Boyles, who had another question.
Yes, I think I will extend in some way the caller's questions about fear. Yeah. And so I mentioned earlier asking you all rather a question about, how do you break through when there is fear with survivors. I like to refer to them as survivors in this sense. But I guess fear has multiple angles. The fear of having to or feeling like they may have to confront or face shame, but then also the fear in terms of whether the system will actually work and protect them. And so I'm saying that to preface the question, what do you do? How do you balance the reality of, things like when folks do come forward, that they won't themselves face criminality. When folks do come forward, how with, restraining orders and things like the orders of protection, because that's just an order that is not necessarily, maintained or policed in a particular way. Those kinds of things. How do you break through with that kind of stuff?
Sure. So I want to say that the first step is having this conversation. So I commend y'all for having us on to talk about sexual assault, because I think that can really break through some of that fear. And so like we said, we really start by believing what survivors, what victims are telling us. It takes a village. So when someone makes a report, we have the NOPD responding, but we also have medical advocates that come to the hospital and case managers, and we really want to help people navigate that process. I know it's not perfect. That's why we do our jobs every day, is because we know that we need to make improvements to the way that the system responds to survivors, and we need to move towards prevention as well. So I think that's something that we really, that's why we all work together. That's why we're here as service providers, as the city, as NOPD.
To piggyback off what you're saying, I can only say, just come, but so much. Victims or survivors don't have to worry about criminal charges and different things like that. They just tell us what happened. We will. The most important thing is getting them the services they need. Okay, so whether it be a protection order or anything like that, we're here for them to help them. So, or to being prosecuted and different things like that for something they may have done as a result or during this process, they don't have to worry about that. It's number one thing is getting them the services they need. So, like I say, I can only hone in the point so much. If you say something, we will take care of you. That's most important.
Yeah, and what about reaching out to marginalized communities, LGBT, sex workers? Talk about the work in that area.
Yeah, so we try to reach out with different events and different things like that to go and speak to these communities to say, hey, look, the same thing. We're here for you. Let us know what you need, especially with our social workers and different things like that. They put on a lot of events. To reach out and touch everybody to, let them know we're here. And that's the biggest thing, just to bring awareness.
Yeah.
Sexual assault really impacts everyone, but I think there are certain communities that tend to be more vulnerable because part of sexual violence includes harassment, exploitation, things like that. So we do outreach. We've worked with the Pride Center before to outreach to our LGBTQ folks. We work with Women with a Vision, which is a fantastic organization. It does a lot of work with sex workers. So it's something that we're definitely attuned to, reaching out to those populations who might, need particular assistance, might have particular vulnerabilities, and are folks that are all part of our community that we really value.
And so I don't want to miss this before our time is up. So
already,
if somebody, no, not yet, but if a person's listening right now,
yes,
I'll say a woman, but we know sometimes they're also men. Right?
Yes, that's a big too.
Then what should they do if they say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to report. I'm going to get out of this situation. What should they do after listening to us?
Sure. So I think there's a couple different options. Everybody needs different things, right? So we have, like I said, our organizations. They can call, for example, STAR, their hotline number. They can also call NOPD and, let them know that they want to talk to a sex crimes detective. So really, they can reach out to their pastor, to their friend who might help assist with making some of those phone calls. We also have a statewide hotline. So there's a lot of different phone numbers that people can call to reach out, depending on what their needs are.
It always starts with 911.
True.
911, yeah.
It always starts there. Yeah. Start there, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. I know you have a question about schools and youth programs.
Yes. So proactively,
yes.
I think that sometimes the way in which we think about domestic violence and sexual assault is minimized. And because we live in a very sexualized culture, among other things, in the sense that sometimes it gets glorified, I think is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
How do you all address proactive measures with elementary or middle school, high school, students?
So we work with the school resource officers to go and speak to the kids. I've done it several times myself. I was just at my alma mater, St. Augustine, speaking to the kids about that exact issue, even issues with sexting and different things like that, what revenge porn is, and teaching them different things like that so they can at least know what it is. So it starts with the education. And if they know, they'll do better in the future. So that's most things. The main thing is just going and speaking to them and talking to them and let them know, hey, look, this is okay, and what's not okay, and what not to do, and what to do, so they can know, at least they can have the information to make a better choice.
Are there any, the legislature's in session, and I remember, I think a few years ago, there was a law passed, so, women who may have to leave an apartment, and they were in a lease.
Yes.
And sometimes they would get penalized, for breaking a lease. But there was a law passed, I think, that kind of remedied that situation. Are there any other laws that have been very helpful or effective, or any laws that need to be changed or modified to help domestic violence or sexual assault victims?
That is a big question.
Very big. You say we had 20 minutes.
So we regularly go up in front of the legislature and advocate for bills, or maybe there's some bills that come up that we're not in favor of, so we might advocate against those. This year, one thing I'll mention, there's one bill that's working to criminalize intentionally infecting another person with a sexually transmitted disease, and we are not we're against that bill because I think it's really important that we not stigmatize things like sexually transmitted diseases or HIV, and so having that conversation I think is important. There's a couple other bills this session. I haven't been able to read through all of them. You know, another thing that we have really been working on, I think citywide too, is access to firearms. And I know that's a little bit of a different topic, but it does really impact folks that are in violent relationships. And so we might see a couple of bills this session relating to that. But we are always trying to make improvements where we can at the state legislature.
And I know Dr. Boyles mentioned, you know, there are restraining orders and orders of protection, what have you. Talk to, because some people feel like that doesn't do anything, doesn't mean anything.
How does that translate?
Are they effective? How can they be more effective? Or are there other things that need to be done?
So they are effective as in, if it's there, then we can take action on it. If it's not there, then there's nothing we can do. You know, if it's on paper and we have an issue where this person's not supposed to be around you, or is that your homie's not supposed to be there, or she not supposed to be there, hey, look, I have this in place, we can take police action on that, you know, for violating the order. You know, if the order's not there, then there's no crime being broken out. You see what I'm saying? So that's where that comes in. That's why that's so important.
I also want to say, you mentioned Ice-T earlier on Law and Order. And I think a lot of folks out there think that our legal system works like it does on TV. And that's not always the case. So protection orders can be complicated. And it's really important for folks to seek out assistance from an attorney or from an advocate who can help them navigate that process, because it doesn't always work the way that we think it does. But like Sergeant Howard says, it can be a really great tool for some folks to make sure that they stay safe. But they might need some help with navigating that process.
And an attorney may be the last. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overtalk you, but I want to squeeze this in. An attorney may be the last route that many of the survivors are able to access. And I actually sat in a courtroom before and listened to a judge be clear that the order of protection was literally a sheet of paper. And so people have to wrap their minds around, you know, I guess that's the point of the question. How do people wrap their minds around the fact that they can leave court and by virtue of just, you know, having to make a phone call, like no one goes to get the gun that maybe of the person that they're afraid of, you know, those kinds of things are not confiscated, you know. So how do people navigate every day simply saying, okay, I can dial 911 when we know that can play out very, very different in real time?
Ooh, that's big. The restraining order, although, I mean, it is a piece of paper, it is a tool that we use, okay? And then from there, we use our advocates and our social workers if these people need assistance in different things or even need assistance in relocating. Or different things like that. There are avenues for that. We just need to know.
Yeah, and that's what also, we didn't talk about safety planning.
Yes.
But that's a part of an entire safety plan.
Right. It's
a whole
thing.
notifying other people. Because I know even as a pastor, you know, and I had a woman years ago, you know, who was going through a situation, a stalking situation, whatever, from an ex. And I said, well, give me his picture. You know, all the ushers need to come and know if he shows up or even people outside so that, you know, we can take action. But a lot of people want to keep it a secret. You know, and that this is happening, that they're being followed or being stalked. It's like, no, tell people, let people know so that then they can help support you and protect you. Right. You know, and so, I didn't want to get, I'm a social worker too, so, you know, but we definitely have to help people develop a safety plan. And so we know some people.
That's where that comes in, the entire plan for this person. So when they do leave the courthouse or do leave from our social workers or do leave from us, we have a plan in place for them so they can feel secure. Okay, we don't just want to send them back out into the world when they don't feel that way. So that's something that we work on daily. Yes.
Wow. Well, our time is just about up, and ain't that something?
Come on, man. Come on.
But give us some final thoughts, Sergeant Howard. We'll start with you, and then Jocelyn.
I just appreciate you guys having us and giving me the opportunity to speak about this. You know, it's something about bringing awareness to our unit. You know, as poor Noonie, I wish I can speak to Noonie. So maybe I'll give me his contact. We can go ahead and fuss all day. You know, so bringing awareness to the unit and the issue, so we can try to help. as much as we can.
All right.
And yeah, it starts with having these conversations. And, you know, to any victims or survivors that are out there listening, we believe you. You're not alone. And please reach out for support.
Thank you both for coming, and we look forward to having you again. You know, because this is a conversation that needs to happen not just once a year or once a month, but throughout the year. Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm ready.
Dr. Boss, our time is up for this morning. Boy,
time
flies. That's
really.
right.
Yes.
Well, hey, we're going to say to all of you, have a great day. Use the day wisely. Protect your peace.
Yes.
And make sure that you take care of yourself and check on somebody that may need your help. This is Dr. Sanders signing off here, WBOK, 12:30 a.m., the station you listen to all day long. Next up should be The Front Porch, coming up on WBOK. Take care.